Welcome back to the guidebook, everybody. Today on the show, we have Lizzie Davey. She's another freelance writing coach, and we've been friends on LinkedIn for a while, but it was really nice to actually get to talk to her and have a full conversation with the real human being that she is. You might remember that she featured my finance breakdown in her newsletter last year. She shares transparent finance breakdowns from freelancers in her email newsletter. It's amazing. Definitely go check it out if you haven't seen it. But in this episode, we're talking about how Lizzie went from a low paying marketing job to freelancing and how the beginning was totally chaotic, but now she's found a niche that works for her. We're also talking about the power of networking, LinkedIn and LinkedIn engagement, authenticity, and how to build a personal brand to get more clients. We've both used LinkedIn to grow our personal brands and also to get clients for freelancing. So I hope this episode helps you see behind the scenes of how we do that and how you can try to do that yourself as well. Now, without further ado, let's get into it. This is the guidebook. We're sharing tips for freelancers, raw conversations with risk takers, and the emotions behind it all. I'm your host, Rachel Meltzer. It rhymes with seltzer, and you're in the right place if you want to be a fly on the wall of conversations with brave, experienced freelancers, recaps of new freelancers' first years of business, and walk-in talks where I share everything I've learned in the past 6 years of freelancing. I'm here to ungatekeep freelancing so you can unlock your bravest self. I hope this show inspires you to go out and take the risk. Welcome to the guidebook, Lizzie. Would you introduce yourself for our listeners?
Yeah, hi, I'm Lizzie. I'm a freelance SaaS and tech writer, mostly for e-commerce tech companies. And I've been doing this. This is my 11th year now. And as well as writing for clients like Shopify, Klaviyo, CoSchedule, I also run Freelance Magic, which is a site that's full of resources and courses for other freelancers.
Heck yeah. I feel like we run very similar paths.
Yeah, definitely.
Where are you located?
I'm in Brighton in the UK, so it's about an hour south of London by the sea.
It's nice to see how all over the world we'll find other people who are doing similar things to us, and it almost feels like having a coworker, you know what I mean? Because we can talk about things and actually feel understood, which I feel like in
Yeah.
freelancing and coaching can sometimes be hard to find.
Yeah, especially that crossover. I think there's like not that many people who are doing kind of that little bit in the middle where it's we're doing client work, but also we're doing coaching and stuff for other freelancers.
Yeah, totally. How did you get started with freelancing? What made you want to go freelance, and how was the beginning of your career looking like?
I think so. I was 23 when I went freelance, so this is my 11th year now,
Wow.
and I know it feels like less time, but also like much longer than that. It's such a weird feeling. Can't really remember doing anything else. But yeah, I'd always wanted to work for myself, and I was working in marketing at the time in like a really low paid job. Didn't really have any responsibilities, and my ex boyfriend at the time, he got a job in Spain. So I was like, "Do you want to come with me?" So I was like, "Yeah." Like, well, I've got no responsibilities and nothing to tie me down here. Like, let's do it. And the plan was to just give it a go for like a year, and if it didn't really take off, then I would come back to the UK, get a proper job again, in air quotes, proper job. But luckily, it did. Well, I mean, I say it took off as in I earned more than I did in my measly marketing job before, but that's not really saying much because I was earning very, very little.
Mhm.
But I think by that point, I'd built up kind of enough of a client roster to muddle my way through, and I kind of got a taste for the freedom that it brings. I love to travel, so in my previous 9 to 5 jobs, I always used up all of my leave and then ended up having to like take money out of my paycheck because I was traveling too much. So I think for me, like having the ability to just like jump on a plane whenever I wanted was it was like novel, and like I just didn't want to
Yeah.
give that up.
Yeah, that is the best part of freelancing. Whether
Yeah,
you use it for adventure or practically, like I both travel a lot. I'm going on 6 trips this year already. And
nice.
also, I have a chronic illness. So, like, I literally do not think I could hold down a traditional job because at least in the US,
Yeah.
like their sick time that they give you like 7 days of sick time. I'm like, I'm taking 7 days of sick time like every 2 months. Like that is
Yeah,
not
it's wild.
enough. And then the amount that I want to travel, like 2 weeks off, or some, I think the most I've heard in the US is like 5 weeks off of like
It's
paid
still not
time
loads,
off.
so
I know. I'm like, I'm gonna use that up in like
yeah.
6 months. I cannot
Like I
do
want to
that.
be away. I want to go away every like once a month, so it's not really going to
Right.
work for me.
I've also gotten so used to like the 4 day work weeks. Like I
Mm,
do occasionally work on Mondays, probably like once or twice a month, but almost, I would say 50 to 60% of my Mondays, I am going to the gym and doing my errands, or like I'm using a long weekend to go on a trip. And it's just so nice to be able to have that control over your schedule, to be able
yeah.
to decide for yourself, like where you're going to be, when you're going to be.
Yeah, exactly. Like just being like, I'm woken up and I'm not really feeling it today. So, I'm just gonna start work at lunchtime instead.
Yeah. Yeah. The flexibility.
Yeah.
Um so at the beginning of your career, like you did it to travel and you were making back that marketing job
Mhm.
income. How did that progression look like over the next, 5 years, where you were still sort of like learning freelance, building your business, raising your rates? Did you have
Mhm.
like a squiggly progression that sort of in hindsight made sense?
Yeah, it was absolute chaos. Like looking back, I'm like, I don't know what, I mean, I still don't fully know like what I'm doing now. I don't think any of us know
Totally.
100%. But like, I look back at that time and I'm like, I was literally just throwing spaghetti at the wall, like literally just
Totally.
taking anything and everything. I think I started as a travel writer, so the majority of my client work was with travel companies. But I was also writing stuff about like short spine syndrome in dogs and real estate in Puerto Rico and just like a mad mix of things because I just said yes to basically everything that
Mhm.
came my way. Um, and then I was on Upwork mostly at that time getting my clients. And then about 2 to 3 years in, I was like, oh, I just feel like I can't earn any more than this on Upwork. Like the rates are really
Mhm.
low and I'm really struggling. And I was seeing other freelancers out there who weren't on Upwork who were earning like bank. And I was like, how are they doing that? And I
Mm.
am just like stuck working like 14 hours a day, just trying to like make a full time income.
Totally.
So I got myself off of Upwork and I started instead of writing for travel companies because I found that a lot of them were very budget conscious. Let's say the rates were
Frugal.
not great. Yeah,
Yeah.
and like lots of people will write about their travels for free, so it was like
Mhm.
really competitive. So I kind of leaned back on my marketing experience that I had before and started landing some marketing clients. So doing marketing copy for um, just a real range of brands, like just a wild mix. Like no, really, there was no method to my madness. Like niche was all over the place. I think I pitched myself as like a lifestyle and marketing writer. It's like, yeah,
Mhm.
not great positioning, but it
Very
meant that I
general.
yeah, very very general. And then over time, I just started to land more marketing clients, and then it kind of really changed for me during COVID. So in 2020,
Mhm.
I started working with a lot of e-commerce tech brands. Obviously, e-commerce was huge during that time, and
Mhm.
so for the past 5 years, that's literally been kind of like my bread and butter, and that's where I found the sweet spot. And I think it was like a combination of right place, right time, and
Mhm.
also like maximizing on an industry that was relatively new, but also
Booming.
kind of well established and booming. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's really I have just been updating the content for my Find Your Niche workshop that I am doing next month, for like the first workshop in my um Get Started Freelancing series on
Mm-hmm.
YouTube. But in the past, when I taught it, it was, I don't know, things before 2020 felt much more stable and slow. Like you
Mm-hmm.
could pick a niche and stick with it for 10 years and probably be
Yeah.
fine. But as my career progressed from 2017 to now, I also went through that where I was on Upwork. I randomly ended up working with coding boot camps on Upwork. And then I was like, there are so many of them, and nobody
Mm-hmm.
is specializing as a freelancer in writing just or doing marketing just for coding boot camp. So I just like fell into that niche and I liked it, but it wasn't like travel where I was like passionate about it. I was just like, this is work. I'll go
Yeah.
have fun outside of work. And I got to a point where I was just like capped out. Like I was making $300 a blog and I had like ooched up to it. I started at like $99 a blog. It was so bad. And then I just slowly made it to 300, 350. And then I started proposing 400 and only one bootcamp said yes. And 5 more said no to that rate. And I was like, okay, it's not me. It's not my skills. It's the niche. So how can I find something that's like either something that I already have the skills for or something adjacent to what I'm doing that will pay more? And that shift worked out. But I feel like any freelancer who is going to make it long term, especially nowadays, has to be willing to like examine your niche, pivot your niche, and understand like why your niche is important. It's okay in the beginning to like be all over the place. Everybody's doing it. Like we both were like, I was writing about like cannabis, dogs, education, coding, like all this stuff. But if you want to grow and have a long business, it's really helpful to be able to figure out the viability financially of niche, the next niche you want to look at, and like slowly pivot into it so you have that like security long term. Otherwise you might cap out or you might get stuck or you might end up stuck on a platform or whatever, you know?
Yeah, I completely agree. And I see that in when people ask me like, oh, well, how did you change niches? Like what was the like jump off point for you? And I'm always like, there was no jump off point. Like it happened very slowly, very organically, like just one client in the marketing niche and then another and then another. And there was never a moment where I was like, right, I'm going to stop writing about travel completely and I'm going to completely remarket myself now as something totally different. And I think now especially like we have to be able to pivot. I hate the word pivot, but pivot
it's more like
necessary.
It's almost like a dovetail. You know what I mean? It's like you're still writing about travel, but then you get one marketing client. You keep writing about travel, but then you get another one, and then you slowly phase the travel to be like a quarter and 3/4 is something else.
Yeah.
And it takes time. You're right. Like it took me 3 months to do that pivot, but I was like ruthless about it. I was like sending hundreds of connection requests and DMs every week to the tech companies I wanted to work for. I made my ideal clients list. Like I was very strategic about it. And I feel like if you're just kind of like, well, I kind of want to do this other niche, and then you don't like strategically and efficiently put effort towards it, it's not going to happen. And like I did for every new client I got in the tech niche when I was switching niches, I offered to do a test piece. So the first one I did the test for free. The second one I did it for like half my rate. The third one was a full price test. But it's like, again, it's that ooching concept where it's like you go from like lower to higher to higher. You offer up a little bit of yourself in order to get over the jump and make that leap. But it's never like, it's never like cut and dry, like clean break.
No, never. And also it's like you're starting again, well, not from scratch, because obviously you've worked with clients and I think that's a big part of like the experience, but you often don't have a lot of like samples in that niche. So you are essentially starting from scratch, proving yourself that you can write about this. So I did exactly the same, like free test pieces for the first couple of clients that I worked with in a new niche.
I think as well, from what I've heard from the people who have hired me, it's like your portfolio pieces sort of lay here at like, I don't know, they're helpful, but the more helpful thing, the higher up thing, the thing that's going to influence them the most is who you've worked with in the past. So getting that first 3 clients, whether you're a brand new freelancer or you're just like switching your niche or whatever, they're going to be the hardest to get. But once you get those first 3, it's all in 3s. I'm telling you, everything's like the rule of 3s.
Power 3.
Once you get a third one, it's like no one's looking beyond those first 3, and then you have that sort of credibility and trustworthiness. And I get poached a lot. Like I put all the clients I've ever worked for on my LinkedIn page as like an experience itself, with obviously titled freelance. And I've had people come to me because they saw me on another company's page and were like, oh, you wrote for so-and-so. Are you open to talking about another gig? And I'm like, yes, it's working.
This is what I wanted. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. So when did you go straight from Upwork to LinkedIn, or how did you end up getting off of Upwork and getting clients elsewhere?
So no, I LinkedIn is a relatively new thing for me. I'd say it's probably like the last 2 years that I really started.
Oh
I
wow.
mean, I had a LinkedIn, but
Yeah.
like
You
I
weren't
never used it.
marketing.
I
Yeah.
wasn't like posting on it because I was like ill cringe. Like, well, I couldn't get over that cringy feeling. But to get once I got off Upwork, I was just sending pitches to companies, like researching, making a big spreadsheet of companies that I wanted to work with, and then just sending them pitches and getting in touch with them via email. And that was kind
Mm.
of my entire strategy for like maybe 2 to 3 years following Upwork. And then by that point, I had enough bylines out there, and my website was performing quite well on
Mm.
Google for people who were searching for freelance SaaS writers. So then there was like a period of about 2 years where the majority of my clients came through my website. So it was like inbound.
Nice.
And then kind of just after COVID, I got on LinkedIn, and that's kind of been fairly pivotal now. Like I've seen the inquiries from my website die down, and now it's more kind of like word of mouth,
Mm.
networking, that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. When you started like to get inbound leads from your website, did you do like blogging and everything? Like you were doing keyword research as if you were your own client, like putting out blogs.
Yeah, exactly. So probably not as much as I should have been, but I was publishing, I think it was like 2 blog posts a month, and then just
Mm-hmm.
kind of optimized the pages on my website. And I think it was a large part of it was like I was just there before everyone else. So
Mm-hmm.
I think not like I was one of the first SaaS writers, but I think I was like one of the early cohorts. So
Mm-hmm.
having my website with that longevity on it and the right keywords just kind of happened to be
It just worked
very,
out.
very
Yeah.
handy. It worked out very well for me.
The
Yeah.
domain authority and the length of time that you've had and been
Yeah.
contributing to your website means a lot
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
SEO. Yeah.
And also I had, so with my bylines and stuff, I had the like the companies that I was writing for was linking back to it, so I think that helped as well,
Mm-hmm.
obviously.
Yeah. So you've kind of done everything as far as
Everything.
getting clients.
Yeah.
Would you say, like, if someone was starting their business right now, how do you
Mhm.
typically recommend, like, what's your number one recommendation for getting clients?
Yeah, so I think now it's like very, very different to how it was 10 years ago. I mean, I would never like encourage someone to use Upwork, but I know that like some people are still finding work
Mm-hmm.
there now. But I would never say, yeah, you should get yourself on there.
It's not like the most
Um,
efficient.
no, exactly. But like if you really need the work and you need it quickly, like it can be a
Mm-hmm.
good place to pick up quick gigs.
Yeah.
Like right now, I think the cold pitching that I did in like those post Upwork days isn't really working as well as it used to.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say LinkedIn networking, like Slack channels with other freelancers and the kind of clients that you want to work with, and just kind of putting yourself out there, like
Mm-hmm.
posting on LinkedIn, um, networking, and just being visible. I think two
Yeah.
most important things right now. I think.
Yeah, I completely agree. I feel like things are really moving towards a more, because there are, I feel like there's so many businesses who need freelancers, and there are also so
Mhm.
many freelancers that are looking for gigs that it feels like there's a lot of competition.
Yeah.
So those like newsletter gig postings or the posts on LinkedIn that have gigs, you're competing with hundreds of other freelancers. Whereas like
Mhm.
if you can get a referral, it's probably just you or you and maybe three other freelancers. Or if you
Yeah.
can contact someone in their DMs with etiquette, there's a video on my
Yeah.
YouTube if anyone needs to know what the etiquette is. But that there's so much less competition when you can do it through networking or through referrals rather than, you know, the listings or Upwork or whatever.
Yeah, and I think companies, like especially now, are far more risk averse. Like their budget, they don't have as much budget. They don't have as
Mm-hmm.
much like leeway to experiment with freelancers, so they need it to work out quickly. So having a
Mm-hmm.
referral or like a recommendation from someone is like it goes a really long way.
Yeah, yeah. And also the like free or discounted test pieces. I have a guide for test pieces on my blog if anyone needs to know whether you should be offering free tests. But there's sort of these phases that I always talk about where it's like if you're a beginner and you've had less than 3 clients, offer a free test. Whether
Yeah,
it's you're a beginner in the niche or you're a beginner freelancer. And then once
yeah,
you've sort of gotten past that first 3 client mark, you can offer it as a discount and so on and so forth. But it just makes it so much easier for the person who's hiring you to make that decision. And for you, it could turn into like every company that I did a free test for turned into a $10,000, $20,000, $30,000 contract.
Yeah.
And it was
Sometimes
worth
they
it.
just need like the reassurance, and
Mhm.
if it's going to take me like half a day to give them reassurance that's going to lead to like 10, 20,000 pounds, like yeah, of course I'm going to do that.
Totally, totally. I will say I don't recommend doing the free tests that are like they give you a job application and you have to do a free test
No,
and you're competing against hundreds of other freelancers. That is not what I am saying. Just like
no,
if you're talking to an individual through a referral or through
yeah,
the DMs.
absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. You mentioned Slack groups as being a good way to get gigs. I used Slack groups a lot, but I've actually maybe I have gotten gigs, but it was like sort of in a tertiary way where it's like I networked with a person in a Slack group and then they remembered me and then they recommended me rather than
Yeah.
like it being directly from the Slack group. Which Slack groups do you recommend and how have you seen that like play out?
Yeah, I think in a similar way to you, like it's just more about the being visible and like being connected in your industry.
Mm-hmm.
So for me with the Slack channels, it's been a similar thing where it's been like I've been talking to someone on there, or someone's seen my name and then they get in touch or they recommend me, or I've been tagged in a post saying that Lizzie might be a good fit for this.
Mm-hmm.
The Slack channels that I use mostly are Tofu, so top of the funnel,
Yeah, Tofu's great.
which we did the festival for last year. And then the Superpath one is good. I mean, there's a ton of people in there, so it can feel a bit like busy, but there
Yeah,
are some
Superpath grew exponentially. I was
really
part
did.
of
It's
Superpath in
huge.
like 2021 and by 2023 I was like, "Oh my god, there were so many people in here."
Like 15,000 people in there or something. It's
It's
wild. I'm like, are there this
insane.
many content marketers in the world? I didn't know this.
I know. And there's even more that aren't in there. It's
Yeah,
crazy. Yeah.
yeah,
But there can be some really good opportunities in there as well.
yeah. And I think like I'm not a massive fan of like the jobs channels in those Slack groups, but
Yeah.
the like the networking element, the kind of seeing people and like being able to DM them and have private conversations and stuff is really useful.
Yeah. I've also found that just like being able to answer people's questions and you can do
Yeah.
this, figure out like where your ideal clients hang out and be able to answer their questions there. I've had a lot of people get gigs through Facebook groups actually because they'll be in a
Mhm.
group where their ideal clients are hanging out, like coaches or like I have a few freelancers that are writing for like wellness coaches or for beauty founders.
Yeah.
And so they're in a Facebook group or a Slack group with those ideal clients and they just answer their questions. And they never promote their services, they just always answer their questions. And then when they have questions, they go back to the writer that had answered the
Yeah.
question or the marketer. And then it turns into a discovery call and then they end up working with you. So that can also be a sort of simple way to do that. And I think like everything else, I always talk about like making it a getting clients routine.
Mhm.
And I have a routine for that I go through where it's like you take an ideal client from your list, you connect with them, there's a whole follow-up routine, but you could also add to that like 15 minutes of engaging on a Slack
Mhm.
channel. And as long as you're doing it consistently as a routine,
Yeah.
it will work. But if you're like, oh, I should have done that. Oh, I'll get around to it. Oh, well, it's the last thing on my list. If it's always the last thing on your list, it's not going to be like sustainable. And it's so
No.
helpful to do things consistently so
Mhm.
you aren't worried when you need to go get clients. So I always recommend like do it first thing in the morning and limit yourself so you don't go down a rabbit hole.
Absolutely, yeah. Because it's so easy to just like spend, oh no, 2 hours have gone and I'm still doing this thing and I don't really
Yeah.
know what I'm doing and if it's gonna work. But yeah, I think exactly like but the consistency is key. And I think about it from my perspective, like when I'm in Slack channels, like there are people that I notice popping up regularly who are like sharing really good advice and it's like their names that I remember. So I just try and like imagine it from the other way around, like reverse that.
Totally. That works really well. Nice. I love those recommendations. Um, so when you started posting on LinkedIn like 2 years ago and you
Hmm.
have 11,000 followers,
Hmm.
how do you think that happened?
Honestly, I don't know. Like there is no, I have no idea. Like honestly, I there's no strategy that I have. But I think it started at the end of 2023. I was like, right, everyone's saying that I need to be on LinkedIn and I'm not, so I'm just going to give it a go for like, I think it was like a month. I was like, I'm going to post 5 days a week for a month and just see what happens.
That is also what I did.
Yeah, and it was like insane. I was like, okay, this is like getting far more engagement than like Instagram, Facebook, like all of the other social
Totally.
channels, and also like people who are in my niche. I find on like other social channels, it's really difficult to like get through the weeds and find people who are actually like in your niche. And I think
Mm-hmm.
for me and for us working with tech companies, working with SaaS companies, like the majority of them are going to be on LinkedIn. That's going to be their kind of social media of choice whilst they're working.
Totally.
So once I'd seen the results from that, I was like, oh, okay, maybe people have maybe they're right about LinkedIn, so maybe I should just do it. And then I kind of baked it into my daily routine, and it was a really good exercise for me to just like creatively write without a brief for a client or
Mm-hmm.
without having like deadlines from clients. And I found that I really enjoyed having that time to myself to just like basically put my brain on paper.
Mm-hmm.
um, just yeah, so I'd batch create posts each week with
Mm-hmm.
whatever I was like thinking of. I'd use questions that I'd get from students, questions that I get from my newsletter, and just kind of write answers to those and then post them on LinkedIn. And I
Mm-hmm.
think for me, like the main thing that I try to be on LinkedIn is transparent,
Mm-hmm.
and very like freelancing is good, but it can also be really shit. And I'm very
Mm-hmm.
open about that on LinkedIn. And I think having that kind of relatable mindset
Mm-hmm.
was really valuable in helping people like connect with
Yeah.
me, and like both freelancers and also potential clients as well. I think having that like human connection is really, really important.
Yeah, you're really authentic on LinkedIn. And I think that is the people who are most successful on LinkedIn are obviously consistent, but
Yeah.
authentic. And that's people are really looking for a human connection at this point, and
Yeah.
not like some aesthetically perfect thing like Instagram, not some negative thing like Facebook, not something overstimulating like TikTok. Like, this is kind of a place you can go to like learn about making your business better, feel heard,
Yeah.
feel seen, and find your peers, basically, like connect with people who, like you said, networking.
Yeah, exactly. And I think once you get to a certain point, so once I got to like 5,000, 6,000 followers on LinkedIn, it kind of just snowballs. So it's less
Mm-hmm.
like they always say it's like hardest to get the first 1,000
Totally.
followers. And then like once you're showing up regularly, there are people who will like share your posts or recommend your posts to other people. So it's kind of like the the growth from 5,000 to 11,000 was like much, much quicker than it was from 0 to 5,000.
Yeah, totally. I just hit 5,000 at the end of last year after 1 year of posting
Yeah.
basically every day. I think I took 2 weeks off. But again, the nice thing about LinkedIn is you can schedule it all in advance. So you don't
Yeah.
necessarily like, it
You
doesn't
have
have to
to
be
be there.
perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you don't even have to post on weekends. So it's like 4 or 5 posts a week. It's so
Yeah.
easy. And
Yeah.
I'll just like make them as I'm inspired during my like allotted 30 minutes of LinkedIn time each day in the morning. And it really like, you're right, it does snowball because I'm now already at 6,000, and it's
Mm-hmm.
been what, 30 days since the
Yeah.
New Year's when I hit 5,000. So it really does get faster as you go. And I think engagement is also huge. Like, I respond to every single comment.
Yeah.
I encourage people to comment and contact me. So it really makes a difference when you are being your authentic self in the comments as well. And I try
Yeah.
to make my comments on other people's posts just helpful. Like, I'm not there to do marketing. I'm just there to like help people and answer questions and like give opinions in a way that's not rude. And I think that
Yeah.
makes a huge difference as well. Like, I always ask before I share a resource, or I always ask before I share a recommendation. I'm like, do you want a solution for this? Instead of just like throwing solution in their face. It's always like, this is so relatable. Freelancing sucks
Yeah.
sometimes. I have solutions for this. Do you want them? And it's not like I almost, it's like guerrilla marketing kind of, you know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. And I think,
But
yeah, it's more, I find, because I really struggled with kind of the whole social media and like putting myself out there at the start, because I'm like cringe. I'm quite a private person. Like I don't really use social media like in my personal life. So for me, it was like, this feels very uncomfortable. Um,
yes.
very uncomfortable. And then I think for Instagram, it was like, oh, okay, I can do this because it's just educating people. Like I can just post like how to like things and it's fine. And then on LinkedIn, I was like, oh God, this is like, it's nice being transparent. But as soon as you start getting the engagement in the comments and people being like, oh, I completely relate to this. And oh my God, I've had this experience too. For me, LinkedIn is like all about the humans, unlike other social media channels where it's less about that. So I think really kind of like leaning into that and, like you say, engaging in the comments. Like I reply to every single comment. If I see a post that comes up on my feed where I'm like, oh yeah, I relate to this, I will jump in the comments and write about that as well. It just feels very like, well, for me anyway, it feels very like natural and like having a conversation with someone.
Yeah, totally. You have to treat everybody like humans on LinkedIn. Otherwise, they're
Yeah.
just not going to engage with you.
Yeah. But it's like those comments that are like obviously written by AI where
Oh
people
my
just
God.
like regurgitate the post in a different way. And it's like, what is your what is your goal with this?
Totally. It's like you're just doing this as a chore, and I would rather you
Yeah.
just not, like, you're
Don't be.
actually harming your reputation at this point.
Exactly. Yeah. It's like,
Yeah,
why bother?
I completely agree. I just don't respond to the ones that feel like
Same.
AI or
Yeah.
they just like didn't read the post, you know?
Yeah.
Are you still using other platforms for marketing or are you exclusively just using LinkedIn now?
So I'm using LinkedIn and Instagram. Instagram and TikTok actually, but I mostly just repost Instagram stuff onto TikTok. But so LinkedIn is mostly, I do post a lot about freelancing on there, but that's kind of where I've got my profile as I'm a writer and for tech companies and SaaS companies. So that's how a lot of clients find me. And then Instagram and TikTok is more for the freelance magic side of things. So all freelancing content and how to's and videos.
Yeah, that makes sense. Hell yeah. Um, well, that's perfect little segue. Tell me more about Freelance Magic, what you offer, what it looks like, how somebody could get into using your resources, all the good stuff.
Yeah, so freelance magic has been my baby for many years. And it actually originally started because I was just getting so many emails from people who were like, how are you, it was when I was living in Spain, they were like, how are you like traveling and doing this freelance stuff? So I found myself like responding loads to emails and it was taking up a lot of my time, and I was like, hang on a minute, is there like a market for this kind of stuff? Like, could I sell this? And I didn't start selling it at first, it was like lots of freebies. But now it's kind of I've got four core kind of like, what do I call it? It's like tracks in it. So there's a workflow wizard, which is it's like a bundle of templates, scripts, and tutorials for freelancers to handle onboarding, client relationships. And I'm actually launching a new version of that next month, which includes a customizable Notion dashboard. So you can manage like all of your projects back end and capacity and pitches and everything all in one place.
I love Notion.
And then I've got, I know, me too. I've done it with someone called Annette Lucina, and she is like a Notion ambassador, and she helped me build my own dashboard.
Oh, that's awesome.
So like a personalized dashboard. So she's built this Notion one for Workflow Wizard, and it's amazing. It's honestly just, it's great. So good.
I'm always jealous of the people who make their Notions like super aesthetic. Like when I sell my Notion stuff, well, all my Notion templates are free, but I always like make them pretty before I put them up for people to download. But my personal Notion is like a brutalist architecture, like concrete, like everything is gray. I can't, it's not pretty.
Same. I'm like functional. It needs to be functional. Yeah. Like that's all it needs to be.
Totally. It's just like a list of notes pages.
Just like a spreadsheet, but
I have like a beautiful, like it's a dashboard. It's very functional, but the one when I like duplicated it, obviously cleaned out all my data to give it to my freelancers that are in Pop Club. And I was like, oh no, I need to make this pretty. There needs to be some colors. This is bad.
I don't want anyone to see this.
Everyone's like, you're so organized. I'm like,
it's taken me 2 days to make it look pretty, but
totally.
I can completely relate to that.
What else do you have?
And then I've got, as well as Workflow Wizard, there's also Pitch and Prosper, which is kind of like a guide to pitching, but warm pitching instead of cold pitching. So going through the whole networking, like platforms that you can connect with potential clients on, how to find out where they are, how to find out who you should be connecting with. That's kind of a walkthrough of that. And then I've got Create Better Content, which is basically a video walkthrough looking over my shoulder about how I create content for brands like Shopify, Klaviyo, like how I'm creating pieces that I'm charging like upwards of £1,000 for.
That is awesome. I have yet to see something like that. Like I've seen people like there are copywriter courses and stuff like that, but content writing, I feel like that is rare. That's really
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah, it's because I had a lot of questions from people who were like, "How do you like write content so quickly?" Because another freebie I have is the newsletter, which goes out every Friday, and it has a list of things that I've worked on that week, including how much revenue I've made, how much money I've billed for, and as well as kind of a practical tip and something called Freelance Money Diaries, which is where I kind of outline another freelancer's financial situation in a less boring way. But so a lot of people are like, how are you writing so much content each week? I can see in your newsletter you're writing loads. And I was like, oh, well, I've got this process that I use so that, I mean, I've been doing this for 10 years, but also I've got this structure, this process that I use for writing each piece. So it makes it much quicker. And they're like, oh, what is that? And I was like, oh, okay, maybe people want to see this. So it's literally just like me walking through the process that I use to create these pieces.
That is awesome. How many pieces of content would you say you write every week?
So it's usually about 4 pieces. So I try and do like one piece a day, and like you, I'm doing a 4-day work week. So I like to stick to 4. Sometimes it's like 5, and that's a real struggle for me. And it's like a very busy week.
Yeah.
But yeah, usually on average it's about 4 pieces a week.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. I do like 2 or 3, but that's because I am also doing one-on-one coaching, which takes up a lot of time.
Yeah.
So, but when I'm not doing one-on-one coaching, I'm just like, yeah, I could do like 1 a day. I used to do 2 a day, and then I got burnt out 3 times in a row, and I was like, all right, I need to stop doing this.
Yeah.
I need to chill.
Yeah, I used to do loads, and I don't know how I did it. Like I'd literally write a piece and then be like, right, I have to start another one immediately. And
totally. I think there's something about the beginning and how excited you are about, especially where you and I, like at the beginning of our careers, we did it to travel. That excitement and like the adrenaline you're living off of, I feel like does contribute to your capacity until you get burnt out the first time. And then you're like kind of knocked down a peg, you know?
Yeah. And also I was much younger then. So I think I was just like, yeah, I'll do anything. And I'm so young and healthy and everything. So
as soon as you turn 30, it's like...
Yeah, it goes down. Like literally the day I turned 30, I wasn't quite that. But now I value kind of time, like downtime, and I'm really kind of prioritizing my health, like mental health and physical health and stuff. So trying not to get burnt out again.
I feel like this is the classic evolution where you kind of go ham in the beginning because you just need to get something off the ground and make it work. And then you slowly end up in a 4-day work week at like a smaller capacity, and you think about your body and you have a slow morning, and it's a very natural progression for freelancers, I think.
Yeah. And I think it's like the changing, like how success changes. So at the beginning I was like, oh my God, yeah, like I've made this much money this month, I'm successful. And now I'm like, oh, I took like every Friday off this month and I didn't work. I only work like however many hours. Like that feels successful to me.
Yes, I love that you mentioned that. I feel like the construct of success is so important to examine every year because you can, I think a lot of times what I see, a trend that I see that worries me is freelancers just setting arbitrary goals. Like you need to know what your capacity is, what you want your personal life to look like, what you want your work schedule to look like, how much money you want to earn, where that money is going. It can't just be like, I want to earn $10,000 a month because I want to earn $10,000 a month. Like it needs to be for a reason. Or else you won't be able to or you'll expect yourself to do like 3 times more in a year than you actually can because you didn't sit down to look at your capacity outside of your client work hours to like actually achieve those goals. And it's that idea of success is sort of that value that's going to drive all of those goals. But a lot of people sort of get into freelancing with the idea of success being a monetary thing, which I think is important. Obviously you need to pay for your living and like, you know, it's a good goal to have, but I think that idea of success is going to change over time, and if you're not examining it, it just turns into this background thing where you end up kind of fighting yourself of like, why can't I reach this goal? Why am I not excited about it? Right? Because maybe your idea of success is actually like, I spent an hour every morning with my dog, you know what I mean? Instead of
And I think you can tell quite quickly, because when I started, I had no idea that it was like possible to earn anywhere near as much money as like
Totally.
I'm earning, or any, like some of the freelancers I know are earning. Like I was like, if I can replace my full-time job income, like I will be happy. And like
Hmm.
for many years, I wasn't earning more than like £30,000 freelancing, and I was like, fine, because I've got all of this freedom.
Yeah.
And then I think there was like, during the pandemic, I was like, hit my first 10K month, and I was like, oh, this is great. And I was like, but I feel nothing. Not like I feel nothing, but like
Yeah.
I don't feel the kind of excitement that I thought I would, because everybody's like, oh, once you hit 10K months, you've made it.
Hmm.
And I think you realize quite quickly like whether that is your idea of success or not, just by like sitting and thinking about how you feel about that. Like if you're
Hmm.
feeling numb or nothing, it's like, okay, so was that your idea of success or no?
I think there's two things at play there. This idea of arrival. We set
Yeah.
goals, we arrive at the goals, but then was your goal just to hit a 10K month, or was your goal to consistently have 10K months? Did you
Yeah.
burn yourself out getting to that 10K month? Then that's not sustainable. Maybe your goal needs to be raising your rate so the 10K actually fits into 4 or 5 clients instead of
Yeah.
6 or 7, right? Like there's sort of so many things about that. I remember in 2018, I thru hiked the Appalachian Trail, which is like 2,000 miles of backpacking
Wow.
for like 6 months straight. And the whole time, you think about getting to Katahdin, which is like the last mountain. You think about what it's going to feel like when you summit. I like
Mm-hmm.
would cry thinking about it sometimes. And I would be so like, you just imagine it so many times. And it is the arrival of the goal. And I got to the top of Katahdin and I felt absolutely nothing. I was just
Mm-hmm.
like, oh, it is over. That's it.
Done.
I'm
Yeah.
going to sleep in a house tonight. I'm going to take a shower for the first time in a week. Like, I'm not going to see my best friends every day because you're like out there with, you make friends with all these people. And that was the very first time that I very tangibly felt like it is not about the goal. It is not about arriving. It's not about the
Mm-hmm.
end. It's about the journey you take to get there, what you
Yeah.
learn, the friends you make. Like, it's not about
Yeah.
making
Totally.
$10,000. It's about
Yeah.
like learning the skills and the marketing positioning and the business acumen to get you to that point,
Yeah.
and all the friends that like supported you getting to that point too, you
Yeah.
know?
I completely agree. Yeah. And it's kind of like, for me, it was, I just want to see if I can do it and like what it takes to
Mm-hmm.
get there.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's kind of, again, like what happens after that? What do you do after that?
Yeah, yeah. It's hard too because it's almost hard to celebrate your goals as a freelancer when you do reach them, because you do
Mm.
have to worry about what's next, and like
Yeah.
next week is just as important as this week when you hit the 10K, you
Yeah. You
know?
can't really take your foot off the gas, can you? Because you're like, oh, yeah, I did this. Okay. Now into the next brief and the next project.
Totally. Yeah, there's always something coming down the pipeline. The to-do list
Yeah.
never ends.
It never ends, ever.
No. Okay, I did want to ask you one personal question. I was reading
Mm-hmm.
your website, and one of the fun facts you had on there was that you used to do donkey racing.
Oh, my God. Yeah.
What? Tell me more.
Just like misspent youth. No, so I used to have like be quite horsey, and we had at the stable yard where I kept my horse. They would go take like the horses for these like weekend shows, and then they'd want to take some of the riders from the stable yard to race the donkeys. So every weekend we would go to like these country fairs, and then they'd have these donkeys in this pen, and people would bet on which donkey they wanted to win, and then we'd get on the donkeys and race them around this track, and you'd have like these middle-aged men like yelling at, and I was like 12, 13, just like yelling at you like, go on, I've got money on you, you need to win. And just be like, what am I doing with my life? I'm just like racing on this tiny donkey.
That is so funny. I cannot imagine. I used to ride horses when I was a kid too, and it was like the donkeys would be the worst thing. I would never want to ride a
Yes,
donkey.
they
They're
were just
so
nightmares.
stubborn.
Yeah, so stubborn, nightmares. Like many of them didn't even get off like the starting line.
Oh, totally.
It was just chaos, absolute chaos. It was very fun, but chaos.
Yeah, totally. That's hilarious. Oh man. Okay, cool. Well, let's is there anything else you're promoting right now that you want to talk about besides Freelance Magic? Is there anything
Um,
coming down the pipeline?
yeah, so the next thing I've got coming out is obviously the next version of Workflow Wizard, which should be coming out end of February. we're just finalising the last bit. So yeah, that's an all-in-one Notion dashboard for freelancers, and it comes with all of the templates, tutorials and scripts from the existing workflow wizard, but in a Notion format, so you can have everything in one place and create your own kind of headquarters for all of your client work. So that's coming next month.
That is perfect. And you have your own podcast as well, right? Are you still recording for that?
Yes, so the podcast is called It's Fine, I'm a Freelancer, and I share kind of more transparent, like authentic takes on freelance life, like existential questions that freelancers might have. And I do about 6 episodes every quarter, so kind of in the middle of, got 3 more episodes left this quarter, and it's kind of like more philosophical questions about freelancing and trying to answer questions like whether AI is going to replace us, and whether, like, what kind of methods of getting clients are actually working in 2025 and what's not working anymore.
Mm-hmm. Heck yeah, that is perfect. And definitely check out Lizzie's newsletter if you haven't already. I love the financial transparency in your newsletter. I think it is so needed. Like, there's so much taboo about talking about finances.
So much.
I hate it. It's so unnecessary. There are so many things that I think I could have avoided if I had understood. Like, financial literacy is such an issue, especially in the US, but like like our credit system is but yeah, I appreciate you doing that. And I actually submitted last year mine, so if you go back in the archives you can find it eventually.
You can do this year's one as well if you want. We can do
another. Sure. I'll do it again. It every year. Yeah, my taxes definitely went up because I am not doing as much traveling for work ananymore, so
can't expense that.
I know. It was really nice while it lasted.
I know. I need to get my expenses up. More travel.
Yeah, right. Oh man. Well, thank you so much for coming on the guidebook. It was great chatting with you today, and I hope everybody goes and checks out your new workflow Notion dashboard. That's so exciting.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
Thanks for tuning in today. This podcast was created by me, Rachel Meltzer. Our music is by John Worthy. You can find more information about the resources discussed in this podcast in the show notes or on our blog at meltzerseltzer.com/the-guidebook-podcast. Also, while you're here, did you know that I offer coaching and community for freelancers? I offer free community events and free resources, as well as paid options like Pop Club, our community for freelancers, and one-on-one coaching, whether you're starting your business or you just need to revamp some things and get out of that feast-famine cycle or take your business to the next level and double your income. I'm your gal. Come talk to me. You can find all of these resources at meltzerseltzer.com. Our free resources are at meltzerseltzer.com/free, and our paid resources are at meltzerseltzer.com/coaching, but you can find everything there from the homepage if you want to. If you have a second, please rate or subscribe, like or comment on this show. On Apple Podcasts, you can rate and leave a review. On Spotify, you can just rate the show. On YouTube, you can comment and like this episode, and you can subscribe to my channel if you want to watch these on YouTube in the future. Thank you so much again for tuning in to our little show. Every interaction that you make with our show helps new listeners find us, so I would love it if you would just take a second to interact with us. It means the world to me. All right, I hope to see you in the next episode of The Guidebook.